grounding us in faith. There's an incredible play by Arthur Miller called All My Sons. It was first staged in 1947, has played on professional stage 6 different times, and made into a movie twice. So this is a story with staying power. The plot centers around the Keller family. Joe Keller owns an airplane parts company which was under contract to the Army Air Force during World War II. The story takes place 3 years after the war in Europe has ended. One of Joe's sons, Chris, has returned home after being in command of a company that was nearly totally wiped out. His other son, Larry, was a pilot in the war and is still MIA and believed dead, though his mother, Kate, continues to wait and wait and wait. Due to the relentless demands of wartime production, Keller's company supplied the Army with a shipment of cracked cylinder heads, which ultimately caused 21 planes to crash and their crews to die. Joe had knowingly shipped these faulty parts because he believed his company could not financially weather the loss of the Army contract. He had come from the deep poverty of the coal mining country, and the success of his business had allowed his family to live the American dream. He wanted more than anything to leave this legacy to his sons. In the court case that followed the discovery of the faulty cylinders, Keller perjured himself by placing the blame on his neighbor and business partner, Steve Deaver. He stood silently by as Deaver was convicted of the crime and sent to prison. Deaver's life is totally ruined. His marriage falls apart, and his children refuse to have anything to do with him. For the sake of his own family, Keller had been willing to sacrifice another family, and of course, the bigger family, all the sons of the war who had died because of his actions. As horrible as this is, can we not identify with Keller? You know, he's not inherently a bad man. He believes that looking after his family and their future is the most important thing there is, and no matter what he must do, no matter who gets hurt, they come first. In fact, he believes his actions only reflect the morals of the society in which they live. In one intense scene after his family finds out about his guilt, Joe tries to justify the crime to his idealistic son, Chris, and he says, "It's dog eat dog out there. The Army doesn't give a damn. If you can't deliver, they tear up the contracts, close you up, you're out of business." Who worked for nothing during this war? Well, when they work for nothing, I'll work for nothing. Would any of them ship a gun or a truck out of Detroit unless they got the price they wanted? It's dollars and cents, nickels and dimes, nobody's clean. Well, in the end, it is Joe's crime, meant to take care of his own, that ultimately destroys his family. Chris leaves home because he cannot bear to be around his father. Larry's fiancée receives a suicide note from him saying that he knows what his father has done and cannot live with the shame. Joe himself commits suicide when the cocoon of self-justification that he has wrapped so tightly around himself dissolves. Now, Kate is left alone, her greatest fear in the world. Now, what Miller himself said about this play is that it concerned the damage and the evil of unrelatedness. Joe Keller's crime is that he believes his responsibility ends with his property line. Miller wanted to make the point that Joe Keller was both a part of and responsible for the great web of being that connects all people together. He wanted to show the terrible consequences of tearing a hole in that web. Joe has done more than kill a few men. He torn the web, and in doing so has ripped apart the very structure that supports life and society. He has violated the core meaning of community and left behind a terrible wake of cynicism, brutality, prejudice, guilt, and self-centered. My God, are we not living through the very same thing today? This is the unnameable harm that is being done. Only thanks to the internet, it is being done right before our eyes. Two British epidemiologists named Wilkinson and Pickett spent more than 30 years painstakingly examining why certain societies live longer and healthier than others. The results of their research are contained in the remarkable book, Spirit Level: Why More Equal Societies Always Do Better. Examining the social conditions of virtually every Western country, Wilkinson and Pickett discovered something astonishing. The more economically unbalanced and hierarchical a society is, the worse off for both rich and poor. In countries with huge income disparity between the very rich and the very poor, the entire society suffers from higher rates of disease and ill health, higher rates of mental illness, higher crime rates, more violence, and greater environmental issues. Western countries today are at their most unequal in history. For example, 67 Americans today are billionaires, while more than 60 billion live in poverty. Conservatively, 85% of all the wealth in this country is in the hands of 1% of the people. It appears that the prevailing belief is that it is okay to take whatever you can get for yourself and yours, no matter what the cost to anyone else. And I think that sounds a lot like Joe Keller. At the end of the play, young Chris Keller, once the idealist, full of belief in the future, says to his father, "I hear what you're saying, I get it. The land we fought and died for belonged to the great big dogs. Men don't love each other here, they eat each other." Now, please don't make the mistake of thinking that the problem of crime and wealth inequality can be solved by any one person or group or party. The work of recovering the viability of our society begins with you and me. You know why we say in Unity that everything is consciousness? Well, it is. Arthur Miller's message is that each one of us lives as a part of an organic whole. In other words, we, meaning all people everywhere, are interwoven with each other. When we intentionally cause harm to another, no matter how strong a justification we put in place, we do harm to ourselves, to our own families, to our own communities, the very people that we wanted so much to protect. As uncomfortable as this truth may be, we ignore it at our peril. Wherever we act purely for selfish reasons, without regard for our social contract with others, that is, the promise to help each other, to care and care for each other, we ourselves are destroyed physically, emotionally, and spiritually. What has any one of us got if we do not have our own integrity? And let me tell you something. Once that light goes out, it's very hard to rekindle. Miller's play could have been written yesterday. A long, long series of decisions to break the social bond, the public trust, has left us living in a society where integrity is thought to be naive and whose heart is largely broken. Many people tell me they can't bear to turn on the news because it's too painful to witness the deceit and violence. And we see that even our children have been infected with cruelty. And there's violence and bullying that goes on in our school. is unbelievable. And what is it about? Loss of faith in God, in country, and each other. So I'm so glad that Jessica set the foundation she did for us this morning, because by now I'm imagining that I have helped you to feel pretty uncomfortable. You came here this morning hoping to have your spirits lifted, didn't you? And they usually are around here, I know. But you see, we have to look at what's going on with a clear eye. And you know something else? We're supposed to be uncomfortable. What would it say about us if we were not? Today's message is called Morality in the New Age. But we can't even make a beginning on the New Age until we revisit the old law with what we know as the Ten Commandments. Consider the context in which the commandments were given to Moses 1,100 years before the birth of Jesus. You probably remember the story of how the children of Israel had been abused and enslaved by Egyptians, and how a young Jewish man named Moses came and rescued them and led them out of slavery toward the Promised Land. But before they got to the Promised Land, they had to cross a huge barren desert. By the time Moses received the stone tablets from God, the people had been wandering in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. And you know what that means metaphysically? As long as it takes. Are you with me? They were tired. They were afraid. They were discouraged by too little food and water and too much hardship. Some were even murmuring that they should have stayed in Egypt. At least they would have been fed every day. Some were even turning on Moses, who had once been seen as their savior. You know what this is? It's an ancient response of people who are terribly afraid of the future. And it sounds remarkably familiar to me today. Metaphysically, Egypt stands for sense consciousness, which means the state of awareness in which only that which is material, in other words, knowable through the five senses, is seen as real. Moses represents the catalyst, the person or situation that awakens us to the possibility that there is something higher than material reality. The people Moses is leading are only one step out of Egypt. Yeah, all they know is that they're tired and poor and hungry. That is their entire reality. And hard as it is to believe, after 3,100 years, most of our world today is still living in that reality. Moses, not knowing how to handle the unruly mob, goes up on the mountain to pray, and there God delivers to him the stone tablets containing the Ten Commandments, a set of laws for governing behavior. And they represent, we think we're light years ahead of them, but you see, they represent a huge leap in consciousness from where the people were at that time. In fact, maybe they are once again a huge leap in consciousness from where we are today. In fact, when Moses comes down from the mountain, he finds that the people have built themselves a huge golden calf, remember? They are dancing around in an orgy of eating, drinking, and sex. Without principle-centered leadership, they have reverted to their basest instincts. They have gone completely crazy. So here comes Moses, fresh from the mountaintop. When he sees what the people are doing, he becomes enraged and demands that they melt down that calf, that false god made of gold. And they do so. Moses shows them the tablets and tells them that these rules have come straight from God and that they will perish at God's hand if they do not follow them. You see, the Israelites' relationship to God was that of master and servants, father and children. They saw God as a sort of master puppeteer up in the sky who controlled everything that happened down on the earth. So when Moses tells them that God will cause them to perish if they don't obey, they calm down and fall in line. They fear God, you see, even more than they fear the dangers in the desert. And they believe it is God who will cause them to either survive or die. This is what fear-based religion looks like. So what was on those stone tablets? You have a copy in your bulletin. And I'd like to invite you right now, if you're up for it, to read them together with me. Just a little bit of modernized language and one or two typos, but never mind that. So let's read together. I am the Lord your God. Do not put other gods before me. Do not take God's name in vain. Remember to keep holy the Sabbath day. Honor your father and mother. Do not kill. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness against your neighbor. Do not covet your neighbor's wife. Do not covet your neighbor's goods. These 10 commandments, this old law, is vital. These are vital guidelines for ethical behavior, for the maintenance of law and order among people. If disregarded, chaos most certainly ensues. You've noticed, right? You'd think that after all this time, we would have evolved to a place where we could follow just that set of simple rules, but it seems that we have a long way to go. So let's take an expanded view of them, and as we do, I'm going to invite you to think of no one else but yourself. This is what I've been doing for the last couple of days, so now you get to do it with me. False God? Do we not live in a world where money is God? Isn't it seen as the power source, the accumulation of which is the be-all and end-all of existence? Isn't money treated like the savior, the answer to our problems? Take God's name in vain? How much atrocity is done in the name of God? And let's understand that murder includes things like character assassination, resentment, bullying, and gossip. Stealing includes the theft of another's good name or time or peace of mind. Adultery means betrayal of integrity, failure to hold sacred our promises and commitments. Honoring our fathers and mothers means acknowledging that we have not gotten where we are alone, that we stand on the shoulders of our parents, spiritual masters, gurus, teachers, and all of those who have helped us. Honoring them is wisdom, humility, and gratitude. Coveting our neighbor's wife or goods warns us about the destructive force of envy and to avoid the deep kind of selfishness that says, what I want is the most important thing in the world, and I am justified in doing whatever I have to get it, no matter what the cost to you. Remember, Jesus said, I have not come to abolish the old law, only to fulfill it. What did he mean, do you think? What is the new law? Thou shalt love God with your whole heart, all your soul and all your mind and all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater law than this. There is no greater law than this. We here in this church, we're just a few, but we can be part of the new morality. Morality that rises up naturally out of our compassion and a deep-hearted awareness of our oneness with all people everywhere. People like us can turn the current trend around. So where do we begin to do this? Well, when chaos seems to be the order of the day, it seems like a good idea to go back to basics, to the basic laws of order and right behavior. They are easily understood. Adherence to them would calm us down and set us back on track, life would feel a whole lot less scary in a society where people had agreed to be governed by these principles. So this week, I'm challenging us all to make a personal assessment, not out of fear of a vengeful, punishing God, but with a willing heart and a true desire to be part of the world's great return to sanity. And if you find, like me, that you have strayed in some way from the spirit of these 10 commandments, simply take action. Begin the return. Take a look at your addictions, your false gods, and pray to be released from bondage. Make each day a holy Sabbath by putting care of your spiritual life first in your life. Respect your elders and teachers and family relationships. Do not steal people's stuff or their ideas or their reputation, nor kill them with your gossip or resentment. Live your sexuality as an expression of your love and desire for connection. Set aside envy and jealousy of others and count your own blessings. You've heard it said that God can only do for us what God can do through us. This is where we begin to turn things around. We in New Thought can lead the way in a consciousness revolution. We're really cut out for the task because we are independent thinkers. Our authority comes from the Christ nature within us. We trust our inner guides, and so we are courageous. Blind obedience is not our cup of tea. But when we see the rightness of a thing, we are strong of will and focused enough to take hold of it. So if you have found yourself feeling powerless because the world's problems seem complex, remember, there is more going on than we humans can comprehend. Spirit is working in the background, restoring harmony, peace, and order and love. And Spirit means to use us to do that. Humanity is evolving, and we in New Thought are on the front line. Our desire to put God first in our lives, our hunger for spiritual connection, and our commitment to the truth are huge assets. The new morality begins with a return to the basics, a willing return based not on fear of punishment, but on a desire, sincere desire, to grow in spirit and do no harm in the world. By taking a new look at the 10 Commandments and being willing to self-correct where needed, we will be taking the first steps toward repairing the massive tears that have occurred in the human matrix and preparing our souls for the paradigm leap into the new law. So I'd invite you now to stay tuned. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to return here, and we're going to take a deep dive into what that new law looks like and what it can create in the world today. And the main thing I guess I want to say today is, having watched the news, I was a little more horrified than actually usual, that we are a part of the solution. And that if we ever forget that, if we allow ourselves to be infected by this thing that's going around that's called, I don't care what's happening for anybody else, but only for me. And we talked about it last week in Circle. It's everything from driving the car to shopping in a store. If we ever let ourselves forget that we are part of the solution, we will add to the problem. Are you with me? Yes. So I hope this week that we can really take a stand and know that this inner shift, this every giant leap begins with self-evaluation. That's what we'll do first. And then we'll move into what's possible. With me?
Yes.
I love you all. God bless you. So I invite you now to a blessed time of prayer and meditation. May this powerful prayer lead you inward and bring you peace. The power of spirit within me now frees my mind from error thoughts and keeps me steadfast in truth. I am filled with divine strength and intelligence. The power of spirit within me now frees my mind from error thoughts and keeps me steadfast in truth. I am filled with divine strength and intelligence. God dwells mysteriously within us. Christ within contains all the love and all the strength we need. It is the still, small voice that speaks of truth, compassion, forgiveness. It is the light of divine intelligence. There is no force more powerful than this light. No challenge so great that the light cannot overcome it. No darkness so deep that the light cannot illumine it. So I'd invite you to imagine a small blue flame, like a pilot light in the center of your being. No matter what chaos there is in the mind or in the world, this flame does not waver. It is the source of our strength, wisdom, and courage, and it will not fail us. As we enter into a time of silence, let's take with us this prayer. The power of spirit within me now frees my mind from error thought and keeps me steadfast in truth. I am filled with divine strength and intelligence. In the silence. Christ within, strength and clarity sufficient to any challenge. What a blessing. What power. We go forward today filled with faith, confidence, and gratitude, determined to do all we can to help heal and enlighten this world. Determined to speak our truth to our leaders and to pray for them and lift them up. And so it is. Amen.
I encourage you just to sing this last part nice and slow.